Well, so for this assignment, we're looking at an event or something of early American history and using it to kind of give more of a background or insight into a certain event that happened in early American history. And what I like to do with history, the thing that draws me into history is our connection to it, maybe through current events or current situations, whatever's going on, and then looking at how it's been handled in the past. And when I was taking early American history, I had a professor who was excellent at doing that. He would take news clips and run them, and then he would pull up newspapers from the 1800s and say, this language it's the same language, and this is kind of what was going on back then, and connect it into reality. Here at the museum, I get a lot of kids that come in and say, why does history matter? So I'll take something like a cell phone and say, okay, well, then let's look at your cell phone. You're glued to this all the time. Your entertainment, your communication, everything is on this. Well, what did the soldiers do? Look at how much more difficult it was for the soldiers to communicate. So I like to look at current events through the lens of history, or history through the lens of current events. And so for this assignment to the Historical Imprint website, I looked at, pulled up two documents on the Whiskey Rebellion. And the Whiskey Rebellion is one of these incidents where there's a law passed that the citizens in certain areas are not happy with. I think we've all studied a little bit about the Whiskey Rebellion, so I don't need to go into depth on it. Well, what happens is they're trying to tax these guys, and these guys, this is their living. They even trade through whiskey, so they don't have money that can be taxed. And it becomes more difficult for them. And we're not arguing whether they should have rebelled or not, but they rebelled. And so, but really what we're focusing on is kind of the response to that rebellion. George Washington handled it pretty smoothly for the first time that this has ever happened. He kind of invokes the right to build a militia to go push down the rebellion. But what he does prior to that is he sends word to them. He says, "Hey, listen, if y'all don't disperse, I'm going to have to send this in there. And you're not going to like what we do. If you don't like it now, you're not going to like what we do." There was some compromise there, and he had some handlers go in and kind of take care of the situation. But then what happens is now you've got destruction that's happened up to this point that's now got to be remedied. You've got innocent citizens who are sitting by that their property's been destroyed through no fault of their own. And how do we remedy that to make sure that these citizens get justice? Whiskey Rebellion is something that I've always really, really wanted to study, like really deep, and I never get a chance to. It's just kind of one of those things. It's like when you see a book, I'm going to read that, and you put it up on the shelf, and 2 years later, I still hadn't read that book. The Whiskey Rebellion is one of those topics. So comparing that to 2020, we see a lot of that today. We're not debating whether these riots that are happening in 2020, whether they should happen or shouldn't happen. We're not debating that. What we're looking at is what is the response going to be from the federal government to that? If the riots are handling, do you send the National Guard in? What do you do? So, and this is not without precedent. The Whiskey Rebellion, first and foremost, first time it's happened. New Orleans, whenever New Orleans becomes is purchased through Louisiana Purchase, it becomes a city in the United States. The people in New Orleans didn't know who their loyalty was to. I mean, the country that was over them has changed 3 times in 2 years. So you actually see martial law enacted in New Orleans. Of course, probably the most famous of it all is the Civil War, the start of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln considered the southern states in rebellion, and so he uses federal forces to squelch that rebellion. Or Watts in 1965, Los Angeles 1992. These are all incidents where you've got an insurrection happening inside, and then you've got to use federal authority to put that down. So now in 2020, we're kind of at the cross point. Where does this go from here? And then not, after we put the rebellion down, how do we remedy taking care of those people whose property was destroyed? What do we do for that? And that's, you turn on the news right now, and I mean, other than election and coronavirus craziness, that's the other thing that's up there, is how are we going to take care of this? How are we going to remedy that? So I think it's always good to look to the past to see where we're going to go to the future. And in American history, whenever you're teaching American history, I would think that would be a smart thing, because it really worked for me. That's what drew me into history. Thank you.